What's up YouTube, Dale here from Separate War Games, and today I am bringing you my first and third place Predaplant branded deck profile. Now this one actually goes more on the side of the Predaplants than it does the branded, and it works incredibly well. I've had a lot of fun playing this, and I've overall done 9 games. I've lost 1 and drawn 1, and these are 9 games in person, so this doesn't account any online testing or anything like that. These are all 9 competitive rounds. With all of that out of the way, please smash that like button, hit that notification bell, and subscribe so you do not miss out on any more upcoming content. So, the 9 rounds were as follows. It was up against Ignistas, as we all know, put on an incredibly powerful Towers monster, and then it is nearly impossible to get rid of it. But I was able to win that one. There was then a branded Despia matchup, which again was really, really tricky, but also good at the same time. It's good because this deck can actually cope a lot better with the deck than just the normal branded Despia mirror match. Of course, the one thing you do need to watch out for with this deck and any branded deck you play is D-Barrier is going to come in, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on in one of my last rounds. I then faced Marincess, again quite like Agnes, as they put an incredibly powerful Towers on the board, and if they have a huge amount of hand traps, like literally I think in the game that I faced, my opponent chaliced me, impered me, and ashed me all in one turn, which was absolutely mental, but again I was able to come through the other side of that one. The final round where I ended up getting first place was against Scrap Dinos, and literally in game 2 he opened up, or it might have even been game 3, he opened up D-Barrier, set that, activated it, passed. He then opened up another D-Barrier, activated it, passed. And if it wasn't for the fact that he bricked a little bit as well, I probably would have got absolutely smashed that one, but I ended up building through that, and then went into Big Chongus, triple-headed Predaplant, who was an absolute boss for both tournaments and did incredibly well. Moving on to the second tournament I ended up getting third place on, it was against Branded Despia, really, really good matchup. I was just lucky enough to get into Super Poly, which broke the boards, and then it was up against D-Link Adventure. I bricked horribly. Literally game 1 opened up 2 Scorpio, and he opened up the Ash, and it was just like, yeah, cool. I think it's like 2 Scorpio, then it was a Predaplant in, and Brandon Red and some other card, and it was just like, yeah, no way happening. And then game 2, I made him go first. I opened up the best board breaking cards possible. It was like Droll, Droplet evenly, but I had no starter, which sucked. So I lost that one. Then I faced Phantom Knights, I was able to win that one. I faced Sky Striker, Mystic Mine, you name it, I was able to beat that one. And then the last round that I drew was against Sword Soul. Literally game 1, he won, game 2, I won, and then in game 3, he opened up Rivalry and Anti-Spell. I was able to break that board, and then it basically just came down to set, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. He then went to go long 1 to do the burn damage, but I had Token Collector in the graveyard, so I summoned that back, got rid of the token, and it ended up in a draw. Anyway, with all of that out of the way, let's dive straight into the profile. So we start off with triple Predaplant Orpha Scorpio. I'm actually hugely tempted to cut this down. So I've seen a couple of builds online. Some builds play 3, some builds play 1. I get the fact that you play 3 if you want this to be a more Predaplant heavy build. The issue that I have with this, and it's why you kind of want to maximize the cards that will trigger effects if they're just sent to the graveyard rather than sent by card effects. So your stuff like your Predaplant Batlist and your Edge Imp Chains. So you kind of want to make sure that even if you discard and this gets stopped, because you discard as cost, you're still going to get some form of advantage from it. But in a previous build, I was playing Preda Practice, and in this one, I've kind of cut that out. But I kind of feel that I want to put it back if I'm playing 3 of this, just to kind of make it more consistent, because I don't always want to use my normal summon on it. Then got the 1 Cobra. Like, this card either gets glued to your hand or doesn't. The best thing about this is the new Predaplant combo. So obviously Scorpio discard, you'd actually summon out your Camilla Sundew rather than your Scorpio, because your Camilla Sundew fuses in with this one to give you the brand new guy, and then he will tribute off to give you your Cobra. And by doing so, your Cobra then gets you branded fusion, and because you've already got a fusion monster in the graveyard, you can actually set off more plays than usual. But Cobra's still really, really good if you can get it to trigger off of a Predaplant effect. Obviously, what put in the amount of work for me over both the tournaments was the fact that it searched me out Instant Fusion, or of course searched me out Super Poly, which was, Yes, in some matchups it's terrible, which is why you only want to play one of it. But in some matchups it's absolutely insane. And your opponent's like, I'll wait. They let you use Cobra and they're like, yeah, cool, what are you going to search? Brand Fusion? And you go, no. Super Poly, activate Super Poly, clear their board off, you're good to go. I played 2 Bathlists. This card's really good, but also really annoying at the exact same time. So its second effect with a Predap counter to revive it from the graveyard came up once. But when it did, it actually ended up winning me the game. So really, really cool. Its other effect is if it's just sent to the graveyard in general, you get to add a Predaplant monster. It's really, really good because it can give you Clamasudo, it can give you Scorpio, so it can give you your starter, it can give you Sender, and then it can also give you the Buffo, which is basically like your fusion. The best thing about this is being able to activate this. It lets you fuse any level 8, fusion summon a dark fusion monster. So the majority of your stuff is going to be dark from the extra deck anyway. So it doesn't just lock you into having a special on a Predaplant, which is really, really cool and put in a huge amount of work. This is why I'm also considering cutting this down to 1, because there's a way of getting this to the graveyard through Branded Fusion. If you open it, there's a way of discarding it. So there's ways of like, right, well, I need a starter, so I'll go for this way, and it's kind of different routes around. The honorary Predaplant monster is Stay Sailor. This card is amazing if it stays in the bloody deck. If you see this in the hand, it sucks. But if it stays in the deck, activating Branded Fusion is so good because what it does is it gives you 2 forms of chain blocking for both your Albion and your Lubellion. The only issue with that is you're not really chain blocking a lot in the current meta with it because at the end of the day, they're still Imperm, they're still Veiler. But the idea is that you'd go Branded Fusion, you send Fallen of Albaz and Stay Sailor. You then do Chain Link 1 Albion, Chain Link 2 Stay Sailor. You banish the Albaz, you can banish the Albion as Chain Link 1. Chain Link 2, Stay Sailor will send the Batless. You resolve everything, and then on the new chain, you've either got Lubellion, so you can go Chain Link 1 Lubellion if you've got like a Tragedy in hand you want to discard, or something like that. And then you go Chain Link 2 the Batless, so again you've chain blocked it. You can spin back the Albion, spin back the Albaz, make your Mirror Jade, and then the Batless will also send you out a Cobra, and then that straight away becomes normal summon Cobra, send a monster, summon out Camilla Sundu or Cobra, give you Super Poly, or give you just instant fusion, and that's how you can build your board through the Predaplants themselves. For the Despias, we're only playing 1 of each, which is why it's a much smaller package. So the 1 Tragedy, 1 Aluba, and 1 Adlerbyton. Again, if you're going to remove your starters or slow down, cut down your ratios of your Cobras, you probably increase your ratios of the Alubas. So you can see where it's more Predaplant dominant than Despia dominant. And then of course you've got 2 Fallen of Albaz alongside 2 Edge Imp chains. Now with my Edge Imp package, I play a very small one, so I play 2 chain, 1 poly, 1 patchwork. It does come up sometimes, which is really, really good, and then there's times where I found myself just siding the entire engine out because it was like the easiest cards to go, right, well, take this 4-card engine out, put in this 4-card more effective engine against my opponent. And then of course Snow, because there are still times where even on the second Branded Fusion or even on the first Branded Fusion where you're better off sending Snow as an additional form of interruption. For example, if you've got Branded Opening and you've already discarded the Batless, then there's no need to send Stay Sailor, so you send Snow instead. And then the last monster is double Ash Blossom, and I also played double Imperm. So the Imperm was really because I felt that I was going to be facing a lot of Floodgate decks. So this came out very, very good because in the Dino matchup, he had UCT, which I didn't really worry too much about because I could still fuse with face down monsters. So you kind of wanted to put him in a position where he's like, right, okay, he has to UCT me now, and then I've still got loads of plays to make. And also for Barrier Statue, it was for Barons. And then obviously what I did was I impermed the Dolkar and I was able to make my plays and continue going from there. So that's it for the monster lineup and obviously the hand trap lineup. Moving on to the spells. Of course, you've got your best card deck of Triple Branded Fusion. So good. Like literally 1 card. Not only can it get you resource, so if you don't want to discard a card for Lubellion, it can give you Albion, yet still give you a starter in the form of the Predaplants. If you need a starter and you have Batless in hand that you want to discard, then you can set up the ability to go Branded Fusion into Lubellion, send in Fallen of Albaz and Tragedy to search you out your Despia. And then the best thing about that is after the Batless, you search the Buffo, which becomes a Pendulum Scale Fusion, which is obviously the equivalent of Aluba getting you the Theatre. So then what that will then allow you to do is you can Buffo, and that means that you can get a Branded Opening, a Branded Banishment, or a Branded in Red from the Aluba. Trill Forbidden Droplets is just the best card to break boards, and the fact that you can then start triggering off your Batless and you can trigger off your chains from this. Again, it's trying to maximize the value from a card like this. Yes, it's still quite expensive. It's still like £30–40 for an ultra rare version. Hopefully when it gets reprinted in the tins again in September, it will come down even more, and everyone should be able to get decent access to it. Like, not that I want everyone running around with droplets, because the card does, like, it is incredibly powerful and it does suck when you get hit by it, but still pretty decent. Then, of course, Trill Pot of Prosperity. I did try the Allure version. The issue with the Allure version is you kind of take out your hand traps and you put in the Merry Carrier. So you replace the free Prosperities for the Allures, which is great, absolutely fine. But then you need to put in your free Merry Carrier, which kind of take the place, or ideally take the place of either the Chain Engine, or it will take the place of the Ash Blossoms and Imperms. It's probably better off taking the place of the Chain Engine, but then you start to rejig your deck, because again, you don't get as much advantage. Like, you've lost the card that you want to send or discard to gain back advantage in the form of chains and everything like that. I've gone with 2 branded opening. Now, this is kind of an interesting one because most branded decks will play 3 of this. But again, because I've actually only got Aluba, the only time you'd want to activate this if you've already got Aluba in hand would be to get Tragedy to the hand or board. Again, the only reason you would activate this is because you want its destruction protection in the grave, or you want to send a Backbliss or a Tragedy to get additional effects from it, which is why it's gone from 3 to 2. 1 Patchwork, 1 Poly. You can do 2, 2, and 2. The way I see it is I want to see chains, I don't want to see these. Yes, it does mean that once I've discarded change and I've searched out the Patchwork, I activate the Patchwork to get the Poly and the Patchwork and chains. I then don't expect to need to use it again, because the games are so fast paced. Like, the chain is just there as free discard fodder and just making sure I maintain hand advantage. That's where it will become a little bit better in an Allure version, because it's just a free dark to banish. But it's worked out okay for me doing a 2-1-1. For the one was 1 Super Poly, just because it's searchable alongside Instant Fusion. So Instant Fusion, you've got 2 targets. You've got your Millennium Eyes Restrict, plus you've got the Predaplant. The Millennium Eyes is only worth summoning if you need to protect everything from Ash Blossoms and hand traps. And after that point, by the time you've searched this out, unless you hard open it, you've already gone through all of your targets, which are basically going to be Ash fodder. Unless you go the long way round, get to an Instant Fusion and hold on to your Branded Fusion the entire way round. Super Poly is great board breaker at the right time. You take it out in a bad matchup, you keep it in a good matchup. 1 Branded Red, searchable. Foolish Burial, so this unlocks both engines of your deck. So a Foolish Burial of a Backbliss gives you the Predaplant route, a Foolish Burial of a Tragedy gives you the Despia route. So such a good card that lets you unlock both options. 1 Call by the Grave, just is what it is. The 1 Planning, such a good card when it resolves, but the issue with it is you need to have either the Starving King on the board, or you need to have your Dracus Depelio. Otherwise, yes, sometimes giving your opponent a counter is not the end of the world, because it reduces their levels, make it harder for synchros and everything, but it still doesn't really change the fact that, yes, the send is nice, but if you've not got a Branded in Red to trigger the destruction effect, or you've not got Dracus Depelio to pretty much negate everything on the field, it's not as effective, which is why it's a 1 of, which is searchable and lets you play. And then the final one is the Branded Banishment. Again, put in a decent amount of work. The fact you don't have to fusion came up once or twice. And then the other thing about it is it lets you use either field and banishes the materials, so that can be very, very damaging. But again, it is what it is. It's a 41 card deck. It's worked out very, very well. Like I said, the only time it bricked and I lost the game was in a D-Link matchup, but you just kind of get them. Playing 9 physically competitive rounds, and it happens once, I'm happy to take that. Okay, so let's go with the Branded Fusion monsters themselves first. So off of that, you've got the 1 Lubellion. It's rare that you actually summon him. When you do, you're basically doing it to recycle some materials. The one you're going to summon the most in this deck is, of course, going to be your Albion. Such a good card. Not only are you sending it with your Mirror Jade and then getting a Branded in Red or a Branded Banishment, but you're also summoning it a lot easier in this deck because of Stay Sailor, gaining as much advantage as possible. And the fact that it lets you summon any level 8 fusion monster, a lot of people were so confused when I started summoning stuff like Masquerade off of it. And because the idea is that if you can get a Predaplant to the board, so for example, let's say you activate Branded Fusion, you go, the best way of doing it is, so a normal summon Aluba search you out Branded Fusion, activate Branded Fusion, send Albaz and Stay Sailor. Chaining 1 this, chaining 2 Stay Sailor. So then what you do is you banish the Aluba, and you banish the Albaz from the graveyard, which is a Despia and a Dark, makes you a Masquerade Dragon. And then the Stay Sailor gives you a Predaplant. So your normal summon will send Backbliss. Backbliss effect will trigger, searches you out Scorpio. Normal summon Scorpio, uses effect to send, summon out Climate Sundew or summon out Cobra. Cobra gives you an instant fusion or a super poly. And then you can basically turn those two, or the idea is that you then activate instant fusion, bring out the other one, bring out the new one, which is this guy right here, wherever you are. This guy will then search you out a Predaplant card, which can be your Predaplant trap card, Predaplanting. You then use this effect to either get rid of Cobra or get rid of itself to summon out Camilla Sundew. Camilla Sundew can then fuse the two together, or one with an Albion, to make a Dracus Depelio, which will obviously give you the Albion effect in the end phase. On top of that as well, you could, in theory, banish Fallen of Albaz and Aluba and make Lubellion, and then Lubellion can just spin them back in and give you a Masquerade. So your board would then be a Albion, a Lubellion, and a Masquerade. And what you're doing by making that particular type of board is you're giving yourself fusion monsters on the board in order to get into your stronger monsters of the Starving Venom, Predapower, and the Predaplant Dracus Depelio, which I'll explain a little bit more. Obviously, 2 Mirror Jade, pretty straightforward and simple on that one. And then, of course, the Albalon Artis. I've actually got this in here because, again, I was expecting to face D-Link. I was expecting to face more dragons. So being able to set an Aluba and then Contact Fuse, or Contact Fuse and Aluba, anything like that, it can come up, and it puts in a lot of work when it does. For the cards that are Despias, or slightly Despias, you've got the one Quinteris alongside the Masquerade. Obviously, Masquerade is what it is. It wins you games. It's absolutely mad. There was a couple of times where I did a lot of damage and then put my opponent under a Masquerade, and they're like, right, well, I need to actually activate 5 effects, but I can only activate 4 before I die. So, makes your life so much better. And then, of course, obviously, Guardian Chimera, Millennium Eyes Restrict. Really good when it comes up because it can protect, and because Instant Fusion destroys, you can actually banish the brand opening to keep it alive, which means you've got a negate during your opponent's turn. But if you're going to do something like that, you're probably better off with a Winder than anything else. But protect your Brand Infusion, and that's the main reason you do that, is you put it on the board, protect your Brand Infusion from like an Ash or Veilers or anything like that, and then use it as fusion material to get into Dracus Depelio, which is probably like your best Predaplant monster. Like, this card's absolutely insane. Really, really like it. Quick effect, put a Predapt counter on one of your opponent's monsters, negate its effect. That's the quick effect. It reduces a level to 2, or if it's 2 or higher, it becomes a level 1. And then while it's got a Predapt counter on it, its effects are negated, which is really important because then that combos off into stuff like your triple-headed. It also combos off into your Starving Venom power. So this one is, it gains attack equal to all monsters' original attacks that have a Predapt counter on it. Make him a big boy. And if there's, I believe it's if your opponent controls, I think it's just a monster in general. When your opponent special summons a monster or monsters from the extra deck while you control this fusion summon card, quick effect, you negate the summon if you do destroy that card. And if your opponent controls a monster with a Predapt counter or counters on it, you special summon this card from the graveyard in defense, which is really, really important. And it's like, it's very difficult for your opponent to get rid of the Predapt counters, because once they've got them on it, it's like, unless you're going to flip that card face down and back up or reset it or anything like that, it's not getting on it. The Starving Venom's a really cool card, but I rarely made it. I made it like once or twice, but again, it requires the Predapt counters. So it requires a Dark Fusion monster and a Fusion monster. It's always treated as a Predaplant card, and then once per turn, when a card or effect is activated, quick effect, you can tribute one monster on either field with a Predapt counter, and if you do, negate the activation. If this Fusion Summon card you control is sent to the graveyard by an opponent's card, target a Dark monster in your graveyard to special summon it. You can only use each effect once per turn. Now, what makes that so good is comboing it off with the Predaplanting gives all of your opponent's monsters, or all monsters on the field, a Predapt counter. So it means you can actually tribute your opponent's monsters to negate their own effects, so you get a double, like a double clearance for your own effect. But the chances are you've probably got a Dracus Depelio on the board, you've got your Predaplanting, and then you've had to have a really decent opening to make this guy. And then they've got to start building up their board for you to get the max value of it. And the chances are they're probably going to activate something first, then get a monster on the board, and then you're going to have to go this rather than planning, or planning vice versa, just to give it a counter to then tribute. So then basically it means that only the second effect that they activate will you be able to negate. Unless you're going second and you can't kill, and then you put a Predapt counter on something, and then you can play from there. And then the last one is the abilities. Probably butchered that. But this card's nuts. So on summon, a fusion summon specifically, you get to add a Predaplant monster or a Predapt spell or trap. And then you also get to Again, you get to target a monster your opponent controls with a Predaplant counter on it, or a monster you control, and then you tribute it as effect, not as cost. And if you do, special on a Predaplant monster from your deck. So again, it's really kind of cool because it will trigger Tragedy, it can trigger all the other cards as well. But it's the fact that it can just give you a Scorpio from the deck for free. Such a good card, really nice introduction or addition to the Predaplant strategy, which is why the deck's now seeing a lot of play. It is a shame because Predaplants themselves don't really lock themselves into fusions, but you do need to keep in mind that, which is like kind of why you want Predaplant Verte Anaconda. But again, it's kind of one of them very, very small, minute details where if it had said a Predaplant monster and any other monster to make Verte, you could have probably been in a better position. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Do it to like, comment, subscribe, share. If you do have any questions, by all means, please put them in the comments down below. I will be more than happy to answer them for you. As absolutely always, guys, stay safe and, of course, happy dueling.